Hey, this is Brent, and today we're going to go through the Add Inclusive features in our app refinement section of the Develop in Swift tutorials. And we're continuing with the Grateful Moments app that we've been working on for the past couple of videos. If you've been following along, you'll have a project already. Otherwise, you can go ahead and download the project files and see that. Let's go ahead and open the project, and here we have the project open. Go ahead and go to the content view, and there's a couple of ways to identify how to see what the app is doing when you're using dark mode, for example. So you can see the different previews. Make sure you've turned the canvas on, and then one way is to actually create a second preview. So we can call this preview, and we'll name it dark. And then we'll call content view, pass the sample data, and then we can use a property, a modifier called preferred color scheme, and then pass in dark. So here at the top, you've got the two previews. And then if you select, here is the dark preview. Whenever you test your app in dark mode, it's good to go through and see how everything behaves, see whether the text is legible, whether everything works as expected. The other way to see if how things look in dark mode is to actually use the preview window down here at the bottom. There's this menu, and it says color scheme, and you can turn on color scheme, and you can look at dark appearance and get the same effect to see how everything looks in the preview. And then you can always turn that off and see how it was without having to create a new preview. There's another option in the preview that allows you to set up multiple views. So if you click this icon here, you can click on color scheme variants, and it's going to load side by side a screenshot of the view. Now, you won't be able to interact with it, but you'll at least be able to get a sense of how each screen looks as you're going through. So you could then take a look at various screens and other items within. You kind of get a sense of how it looks with that turned on. Again, this is non-interactive, so you can't click and drag to see how it behaves, but you get a sense for how that works. So then you go ahead and then uncheck that, and actually you just go and select the live preview, so that's where that comes in. The next item that we want to evaluate is how well the app responds to dynamic text. So dynamic text is a setting that you can set kind of the overall size of text on the device. So for those who need to be able to see things a little clearer, they might set the text, the default font size, much larger. So to preview that, let's go to our moments, and let's go to the moment detail view. And in order to see how this behaves with longer text, let's create another preview. And in this case, we'll say preview, and we'll say long note. And then let's do the navigation stack and the moment detail view with a moment dot long text example. And then we want the sample data container as well. So now we have this other preview, so we select that one, and now we see a lot more text. If we go back to this button down here where we had the controls for the color scheme, you can also see one at the bottom, which is dynamic type. So go ahead and enable dynamic type, and then notice as you change the scale, you see how it behaves. Now, by default, the 3XL, the XXX large, is the standard default largest size. You can then go in and enable extra larger or more large. I don't know what else you want to call it, but it can actually get pretty big. And so here you can preview that. And so you have the AX 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so, yeah, I mean, that's pretty big text. And so as you can tell, when the text gets really big, it starts to shorten and you get ellipses and things. And so as you're evaluating it, what you're doing is you're trying to figure out, well, what's the expected behavior for when the font size is really big? And does it show everything? Is it working as expected? Let's go over to the hexagon accessory view. And down at the bottom, we've got a couple of previews. And let's take a look at the multiple badges preview. And let's change this so that we're seeing the dot standard size and with the layout. And then let's go ahead and set the dot dynamic type size to dot large. And let's turn off this here. So now we can see this preview. Well, if we select, sorry, we got to select the multiple badges. So if we select the multiple badges, then notice that this is on the standard size. And if you look here at the badge, we actually see an ellipse because the text doesn't fit when you've set the font size to large or bigger. And so we need to address that. So we want to go up to where it says if badge count is greater than 1, then we have our text. And then under the bold, we want to set a modifier that says minimum scale factor and put 0.3. And notice now the text shows up. So what this is doing is we're setting a maximum or minimum scale where we want this to show up regardless of the font size that the user selects in this particular control, this view element. We want the text to always be showing, and so that text will not ever get bigger. And so we maintain using the minimum scale factor. Let's go over to the unlocked badge view. And here, when you set the dynamic type to large, you'll notice that a lot of the text is truncated and we're not actually seeing multiple lines, and it's failing to show properly. So we can adjust that. If we come under the frame, let's modify this frame so that we say frame and set the width, and we'll set it to 210. And then we set the frame min height. So here we're setting a minimum height. We're saying 225. And then we need to do another one called fixed size. So the way this works, and notice how the text now fits a little better. So what we're doing is we're allowing this to adjust in size, where we're saying the minimum height is 225, but you have to use the fixed size because when you use min height, then there's no limit. If you say fixed size, then it sets the limit so that the scaling, so it's not larger, to fill the screen. Because again, remember, if I clear this, if I just press Command and comment this out, well, that's not what I wanted. If I delete this, then notice it fills the available space because the minimum height is not, we're saying we don't want to go smaller than 225, but it's not setting a limit on the max height. And so in that case, we can say dot fixed size, and then it will maintain the initial size that we want. Let's jump over to the badge detail view and see how that looks. And again, we'll turn on, we have this enabled for the badge view. So we have it's showing down here the 3x large. Let's modify the padding here. So let's remove this example or this modifier, and we'll say frame width as 320, and then dot frame min height as 410, and then of course we need to add the fixed size. So now that updates a little better. The other thing you can do is embed this V stack in a scroll view so that if the content is larger, then it'll fit. So you could say scroll view, and then down here at the bottom, underneath this, we'll add another thing. And so now what we've done is we've added a scroll view. Now the problem is the initial spacing or allocation starting point, I guess you call it, is that everything's at the top. Well, we can adjust that so that when we have this in a scroll view, we want it centered. So there's a couple of properties. The first is dot scroll bounce behavior, and we say based on size. So before we were scrolling, and before I had this, it was bouncing, but there was no need for it to bounce because it doesn't need to scroll yet. And so here we're saying, I just pasted that back, don't bounce. So now it's locked in, but now we want to center it. Then we have a modifier that says dot default scroll anchor, and we say dot center, and then we say for dot alignment. And so now it's centering it, and if there is a larger badge that requires scrolling, then it would allow you to scroll only as needed. Let's go to the achievements view. And if we experiment with the size, the dynamic type, and if we go large, really, really big, notice that things start to fall apart and it scales. It's very unwieldy. It doesn't fit. So you can actually limit the dynamic type size. And to do that, you can come down to under the navigation stack. We can say dot dynamic type size, and you do 3 dots, 1, 2, 3, and then dynamic type size dot x large. So what you're doing is you're setting a limit. You can have any dynamic type size from the smallest up to the 3x large. So now if we set the dynamic size, then notice it doesn't change. Even though I've set a larger size, it doesn't scale up beyond the 3x large. Then let's go over to the moments view. I've noticed sometimes we're not able to change the dynamic size in a given view, and I'm not exactly sure, but we can check this in the view that hosts this, so we can check it out here in a second. Let's modify this. What we're wanting is on the bottom of the navigation stack, we want to say dot dynamic type size, and we'll do the same thing, dot 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 dynamic type size dot x large. So now let's go back to the content view where we can see this. And here, I'm not exactly sure why that is not doing that, but the tutorial doesn't say anything about it. So yeah, not sure why sometimes you can modify it in the preview and other times you can't. So, well, maybe it's just Xcode. Maybe that's a bug. Anyway, The idea then, again, is that you're making changes so that based on the size, okay, see now it shows up. Yeah, this is a bug. Let's go ahead and modify this, and as you go larger, notice that it doesn't go beyond the 3x large. Yep, just like that. So again, you're making adjustments. You're making a decision by saying, I'll allow certain sizes to change, but if beyond a certain size, we won't allow it because it doesn't make sense for the view. But then for other sizes, we can modify it so that it fits better and is more responsive as the text gets larger. The last item in this tutorial talks about localizing text. So when we talk about localized text, we're talking about presenting text in a format that is set up to the user's device based on the language that they've selected. Now, there are ways to handle localization where you're providing text that replaces the English text with other supported languages, whatever you end up supporting. This tutorial doesn't cover that, but there's more information linked in there. The idea for today is to talk about how do we handle presenting localization based on the controls and things that are built in to Swift, so specifically around dates. Let's go to the streak view, which is, where is it? Okay, there it is under achievements. In the streak view right now, we're setting it up for the number of days, so we're saying 23 days. But often there are times where we don't have 23 and say we have 0 or 1. And so let's set up some preview, and you can add in the same preview, because these are small, you can actually just have multiple. So let's just say streak view, number of days, press tab, and then we're going to say 0. And then streak view, press tab, number of days, press tab. We'll set it to 1. So right now, the way it sets up is it says 0 days, 1 days, and 23 days. So obviously where it says 1 days, that's grammatically incorrect. And there's a way to fix it that also allows it to work well when you're dealing with internationalization or localized text in other languages. To address this, we're going to create a function. So below, let's see, below the body, we're going to say private var attributed text, and it's going to return an attributed string. And we're going to say var attributed string equals, and attributed string is a type of string that allows you to pass in modifiers and method calls. You can return, basically you're piecing together a string so that various parts of the string are formatted in different ways. And that's what's called an attributed string. It'll make sense once we go through this. So here we're going to say localized, and then we're going to start, and we're going to use the caret symbol, which is over the number 6. So if I press shift and then the number 6, it gives us this little caret. And then I'm going to use a square brace. And then I'm going to string interpolation. So the backslash, open parentheses, and then we're going to say number of days. And then we're going to do a backslash n and the word days, and then a closing bracket, and then an open parenthesis, and then we're going to use the keyword inflect, and then a colon, true, and then a closing parentheses. I think, let's see. Let's make sure we've got this right. So we say attributed string localized, and then we have quote, caret, square bracket, backslash. We're having a great time, aren't we? Number, oh, I misspelled number of days. Sorry, that's referencing the variable. So that's why that was incorrect. So that text is right, and then we're going to say return attributed string. Now, we're going to modify this again. We're going to make some changes here, and it shows a warning. It says, hey, you're not using this as a variable. Why don't you just use a let? We're actually going to modify this here in a second. But first, what we're doing is we're creating this attributed string, and we're saying it's localized, and then the number, and then days, and we say inflect equals true. And so what it's doing is the inflection will return whether it's days or day based on the number. Now, to make that happen, we want to modify it, and so we're going to say if let range equals attributed string dot range of, and it's going to be, we're going to do quote and then backslash number of days, and then we're going to say attributed string and then a square brace range dot font equals dot system size 70. Now let's replace the text. So we're going to modify this, or I'm removing the font. So we're going to say text is attributed text, and then we're going to say dot multi-line text alignment dot center. Now we can remove the days because we're replacing the text there. Okay, so let's see what's happened. If I comment out this part in the if let, let's say command and then /, if I comment that out, the text is returning the number of days, which is the number, and then this \n means new line, which means like return, and then days, and the inflection is true. It's calculating whether or not it should say day or days. And so here, what we're doing is we're saying, I want the range of the variable number of days, which is however many characters. In this case, it's 0 and 1. Here we have 2. The range, we're setting the font for that range, for that number, to 70. So now we have a larger font for the number, and then we have days, and it's changing this appropriately. And if you were to localize in a different language and it had different rules, then it would be updated as well. Let's go to the badge detail view. And here we're going to change how the dates behave based on the locale. So we can create a preview, and we can say preview and give it a name. We're going to say Spanish language. And then we're going to say badge detail view badge. We're going to say dot sample. And then we're going to say environment, and we're going to pass in, we're going to do \dot locale, comma, and then locale and a parentheses identifier, and we're going to pass a string, and we're going to say ES. And now we have another preview, so go ahead and select that preview. And then notice that the date is now shown in Spanish. So here it's presenting the date in the format based on Spanish. Now in this case, it's the kind of, they refer to it as international Spanish, but there are more specific locations that you can specify, and you'll see that when you're dealing with various types of Spanish spoken throughout the world. Let's go to the moment hexagon view, and let's do a similar thing. We'll have a preview, Spanish language, and we'll say moment hexagon view, and the moment, we're going to say moment dot image sample, and then pass environment, and we're going to say / dot locale, comma, capital locale, and set the identifier to ES. Now, here we have a date. Now notice what happens if I go to the Spanish. Notice that it actually didn't change the date. And the reason for that is we were using a formatter for this date. So we had a custom display for this text. So to fix that, we can actually pass in a locale for that date. So here we're using this formatted, the timestamp dot formatted, and we have everything here. So here we were referencing specific items that we wanted to present. So the first thing we need to do is create at the top an environment variable. So we're going to say at environment, and then we're going to say / dot locale, and we'll say private var locale. Oops. So now we can reference methods on the locale in order to pass that in for the date modifier. So here inside where it says date, time, month, dot abbreviated, we can actually change this. And if we, looking at the tutorial, so you can actually chain things. So if you just press return at the beginning of that, date, time, month. So now we can say return this, and we're going to say date, time, dot locale, and then pass in the locale object. And then the month, abbreviated day, will still remain. So now you'll notice that this date changed. So if I go back to my first preview, these are, I didn't set the locale in the preview, but in the Spanish language, I set the locale, and then I use the locale for my date time formatting. So now when I click the Spanish language, notice that it puts the date in the order that's expected based on the locale. So now that I had updated the text so that it's going to change based on the locale, you can actually add another preview. And in this case, like I mentioned before, you have the language, but then you also have the region. So for example, I can create a preview, and we'll call this English language. And then we'll say region is Great Britain. And inside that preview, we're going to say moment hexagon view, and we're going to pass in moment, and it's going to be moment dot image sample. And then for the environment, we're going to pass in environment, and we're going to do the / dot locale, comma, locale. And in this case, we're going to say identifier, and we're going to say en underscore GB. So now we have an English, and notice that again, the formatting is switched because in Great Britain, they'll put the date, the day before the month. So here in the original, we've got December 8th. And this is based on kind of the American English, where you've got the month and then the day. But then if you use the British English, it's putting the order as 8 of December. And then similar with Spanish language, you've got similar, but it's got the spelling for December in Spanish, the abbreviation in Spanish. So you can use the region to see how it behaves. And again, once you set the locale in your code, meaning that you're presenting the text, the dates, for example, in the locale, whatever the user has, then when they go to use the app, you will see this is a preview. So we're just seeing how it behaves with this information. But you'll know that, oh, if a user that has their device set to English, but it's Great Britain is their region, then they're going to see the dates formatted in what they expect. All right, so that is everything in this video. So pretty straightforward. Let's go back to the tutorial. And again, if you want to learn more about localization, there's a link down here. If you go down here, there's a section that talks about localization and internationalization, where you can actually provide additional files that have the strings translated so that when you have these different words that are unrelated to the dates which are built in, then you can provide translations. Let's check our under understanding. How do you restrict the size of scalable content? So here we have minimum scale factor. So that was one. Oh, that only applies to font. Oh, okay, it's actually, you're right. Someone was saying it and I didn't hear you. Dynamic type size specifies how large scalable content should be. So that's where that comes in. Why is it important to use locale? To display dates in the correct format, to display information that reflects people's language and region settings, to display currency in the value. So here it's this, to display information that reflects people's language and region settings. Yep. Awesome. Good job. Well, thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe and be on the lookout for the next video.